ever-changing world. From the News Channel 5 network, this is Issues of Faith.
Hello everyone, welcome to Issues of Faith. I am Ben Hall. Very interesting show today. We're talking about Jerusalem and the Middle East, and we are talking with someone who has covered this part of the world for years, and he has written a new book, Dateline Jerusalem. And we are very happy to have with us Chris Mitchell with Christian Broadcasting Network. There you see the book. You can buy it. It's very interesting, fascinating look at this important part of the world. Chris, thank you for being with us.
Ben, great to be here.
So let's talk about it. This book I found interesting because there's real hope in it.
Yeah.
What is the essence of the message you're trying to convey in this book?
I think it is a message of hope. I know a lot of books that deal with prophetic things or themes, can be sort of doom and gloom, but I think this is a hopeful book because I think the end of the story, at least in the Bible, is a love story, and it ends on a note of a lot of hope. One of the things I wanted to do in the book is try to explain to people what is happening in Jerusalem, in Israel, in the Middle East, because I think sometimes you can look at a 2 or 3 minute story, and sometimes it's a recurring theme. It's a conflict, it's rock throwing, it's bombs. But there's a lot more going on in the Middle East than just that. Israel's a vibrant country. There's a lot of things happening geopolitically. But I guess I would say the theme of the book, the basic theme, is that 2,000 years ago, all roads led to Rome. And I think we're living in a time where 2,000 years later, all roads are leading to Jerusalem. There's amazing geopolitical events and spiritual trends that focus back on the city of Jerusalem.
There's so much turmoil. We turn on the news and we see all of this, rock throwing is maybe the nicest stuff you see going on over there. All kinds of change. And so you see this leading to something good, because in a 2 minute story, you're not going to be able to maybe connect the dots.
That's right.
And that's what you're trying to do here, is connect the dots, that all of these bad images lead to something that's not bad. Is that right?
No, it is. I think the dots that I've been trying to connect in the book, there are good and bad dots. I mean, there's Israel surrounded by enemies right now. One of the dots you could look at is some of the Syrian rebels right now fighting a civil war against the Bashar Assad regime. And one thing they want to do is overthrow the Assad regime, and then they want to come and destroy Israel, conquer Jerusalem. Another dot you could think of is say a Jewish family coming from Brooklyn, arriving in Ben Gurion Airport. They want to make Aliyah. And there's a desire among many Jews around the world right now. They want to return to the land, the promised land from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Another dot you could have is a pastor from Brazil coming to Israel. There's a great fervor among Christians around the world wanting to come to visit Israel, to see the land where Jesus walked, and also to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. There's an unprecedented prayer movement around the world where literally thousands of churches and millions of Christians are praying for the peace of Jerusalem like never before, like it says in Psalm 122.
Is it safe to live in Jerusalem today? And how are Christians, how are they treated by Muslims and just in general?
Well, I think it's a very safe place. I mean, it's ironic that the book begins in Tahrir Square in the middle of the Arab Spring, and there's a chapter there that also talks about our experience when we first arrived, when the Second Intifada, which is an Arabic word that means struggle, began, and we literally for 3 or 4 years we were surrounded by suicide bombings and bus bombings and shootings, and yet the question that you get almost all the time is, it safe? And I would say, despite those exceptions, it's a very safe place to visit. And the people that I've talked to, the pilgrims that have come, the Christians that have come to visit the Holy Land, they say without exception, there's either family or friends that say, are you crazy for going to Israel? And yet when they come there, almost without exception, over the 13 years I've lived there, they say they feel safe, they feel at home, and they have sometimes a life-changing experience.
Do you think Americans are ill-informed? And I'm going to say, I think they probably are. And if they are ill-informed about what's happening in Jerusalem and in the Middle East, what is the biggest misconception?
One of the biggest misconceptions is what Israel is like. I mean, they feel like if they're going to get off a plane in Ben Gurion Airport, they're going to have to be issued an M16 or something, or, go into a foxhole. I think the misconception is that there's always violence there. Life goes on like normal. People go to school, people go to work. People go to education and colleges. That's one of the biggest misconceptions, I think. And I think people here in the United States, and that's part of what I wanted to do in Dateline Jerusalem, is give them a context of what's happening in the Middle East. And I know people here, they've got their own issues. The laundry's piling up. They got to get the groceries. What's for dinner? And how am I going to pay the bills this month? So I think people, like anywhere in the world, are concerned with the day-to-day issues of life. But I think they do have misconceptions about what's happening in the Middle East. And another one I would say, Ben, was the fact that we are in a battle. We're in a war. Israel's on the front lines. It's a war against Islamic radicalism that wants to destroy Israel. And eventually they want to destroy the U.S. I know that sounds crazy, but if you look at the things they say Israel is the little Satan, the U.S. is the great Satan, and this is really a clash of civilizations that we're facing.
And there's been talk about what's at the root of this. Is it the poverty in some of these Muslim countries? Is it the lack of education, the lack of opportunity? What do you think is behind this?
Well, I think it's an ideology and a theology. I think people need to understand. I don't think it's really poverty, but this is an ideology and a theology that they feel that this is the end of the age. Many Muslims in the Middle East today believe we're living in the end times. And for example, in Shiite ideology and theology, they feel like they're preparing the way of what they call the Islamic Messiah. In Arabic, it's called the Mahdi. And so they're preparing for his coming. Now, one of the things they do to prepare for his coming is they want to have turmoil. They want to have chaos in the world. And to do that, this is part of the reason why Iran right now is pursuing nuclear weapons. So when you combine this nuclear technology with this messianic ideology, it's really like a toxic brew that have regional and global implications.
So you're saying that for their second coming, before that happens, there needs to be complete chaos, turmoil, war, and that they may be trying to make that happen,
right?
Believing that the second coming is about to take place. Right. And so if Iran were to get a nuclear weapon, that would be a disaster.
It would be a disaster. I think it would, that they talk over there in Israel, it would really be a turning point in history. Two things are going to happen in the near future. It seems like either Iran will get a nuclear weapon, which would change history, or Israel may attack Iran's nuclear facilities to prevent that. And so one way or the other, I think we're going to look in not too distant future at some sort of a confrontation that really going to change the complexion of the Middle East. But this is what their ideology, this is what they say.
When I hear that, it doesn't sound very hopeful.
No.
I mean, it seems to me as though, how are we really going to stop Iran? We meaning the world from obtaining nuclear weapons. I mean, is that a realistic thing that we can do?
I think it is a realistic thing we can do, and I think right now, some people and I agree that we might be in the kind of page in history in 1938 when Neville Chamberlain went to Adolf Hitler and he signed the Munich Pact. And then he came back to England and he said, we have peace in our time. I think negotiating with a regime that has committed to this kind of messianic ideology is a bit of an illusion. And I think they're not going to be dissuaded by sanctions or by these negotiations. And I think a credible military threat might be the only way to dissuade Iran from getting nuclear weapons.
Is this Arab Spring a good thing? Because you can look at it as they've been ruled by dictators and these very sort of despotic type of leaders.
Exactly.
And now they're coming out of that. And that's good, and maybe it's tumultuous, but in the long run it's good. Is it a good thing?
Well, the book begins in the middle of Tahrir Square when I was there during the just a few days before the Mubarak government fell. Found myself in the middle of a riot. Never happened to me before. Was able to survive that and then get out of Cairo in one piece. But I think that was what I found there in Tahrir Square, and you'd appreciate this as a reporter, talking to a lot of people on the streets. They were hopeful. They felt Mubarak was a despotic dictator, and they wanted better education. They wanted a better economy. They wanted a better life for their families. And yet, what started with a lot of hope, at least in Egypt, didn't end hopeful when the Mohammed Morsi government came in, the Muslim Brotherhood took over. Now that situation has changed in the last several months, but I think the hope and the scent of democracy really became replaced in many ways, in many places, by this smell of this Sharia law, this Islamic fundamentalism that really had been suppressed for decades, but really has risen. And I think that's what we're seeing in the Syrian civil war, this sort of this Muslim Brotherhood, trying to overthrow the Assad regime. And I think that's sort of the fruit of the Arab Spring. It's really become more of an Islamic winter.
And I love how in the book you do have segments of your scripts, you know, because we as reporters, we put these 2-minute stories together
right.
that come with all kinds of information, but we can never get the whole thing out there. We only have a couple of minutes.
Exactly.
And you
yeah.
put the scripts in there, but then you kind of give some of the backstory,
Right,
that story into Here Square. Where do you think we're going here? I mean, it sounds like you're saying there's an ideology, a Muslim ideology,
right.
that wants to destroy, is that what you're saying, Christianity?
Yeah, they do. I mean,
and that's very depressing.
That is depressing. And we talked to an Iranian expert not too long ago, just a few weeks ago, and we're talking about this whole Iranian negotiations. And he says what they want to do, and what they say clearly, is that they first want to destroy the Jewish state, which represents Judaism. Now, they know that Christianity is based on Judaism, and then they want to destroy Christianity. And that's what he was telling us, this Iranian expert who understands the Iranian mindset and their ideology. So I think in the short term, it may not look too hopeful. And I think in the days to come, it's going to be both great light and darkness. And I like to quote two authors. One is Charles Dickens. He said, "It's the best of times and it's the worst of times." And Isaiah said in chapter 60, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon you, and deep darkness covers the peoples." And I think we're going to see a combination of this light and darkness in the days ahead. Yet, at the end of the story, it's a very hopeful story. And I think that what's happening right now is that Jerusalem itself is this crossroads of history and prophecy. And we're seeing both geopolitical events and spiritual trends going back to the city of Jerusalem. And the end of the story is the end of what happens in the Bible. And Jesus said that he would return one day to the Mount of Olives. You can go there to Jerusalem. You can see the Mount of Olives now, where he's going to come back. And I think that's the hopeful sign of what's coming. And the end of the story is really a love story. And that's how I end the book. It's a love story between God reaching out to man, and God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. And really, it's a story of the bride and the bridegroom, and one day the bridegroom will return for his bride.
Well, we have to take a break. I want to come back, talk a little bit about how you got into this job, which I think is very interesting, and also just what is America's role, what is our responsibility now in this part of the world. But we'll take a break, come back, continue our discussion right after this.